back vibe, baby.
Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I'm your host, of course, Joe. And before I get started, I always like to say, if you are struggling right now, you are not alone. So please don't suffer in silence. Today, I'm really excited to have my guest, Margaret L., sober since February 20th, 2011. A mother of three, a grandmother, and a woman whose life today is rooted in faith, service, and helping others find freedom. After nearly losing her life in a devastating car accident, told she might never walk, work, or use her arm again, Margaret found a new way to live through God and the 12 steps. Today, she lives recovered, sponsors women, helps lead a faith-based recovery home, and travels sharing a message of hope. Proof that no matter how broken things feel, a new life is always possible. I'm really looking forward to learn more about Margaret's story. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. Hi, Margaret. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Joe.
Well,
How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. And thank you so much for your willingness to be on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me.
Well, it's an honor. It really is. So what was it like growing up, Margaret?
Oh, I had an amazing family. I was adopted as an infant, so I never knew my biological parents. I was adopted very early on in my life, came home 4 days old from the hospital with my parents. So they're the only parents I've ever known. And they provided absolutely everything I needed for success in life.
So, did you know early on you were adopted, or did you find out later in life? Okay.
I did. My parents were very open with me about the adoption. It was very different than it is now. I know women that have children that are not able, or that are able to have a relationship with them, and that's not how it was done back in the day when I was adopted. I got a little paragraph of information telling my parents some history and medical stuff, mostly paragraph long, and that was it. And good luck to you. There was no manual.
Yeah, I guess we don't come with manuals, do we? Especially that must have been. So, what was like your attitudes or your earliest attitudes towards like alcohol and drugs? Do you remember any of that?
Oh yes. Well, I was from the get-go, I was a little off, not externally, but internally. I knew that there was something a little different about me than other kids. And it wasn't real noticeable if you didn't know me well. My parents, I usually gave them a run for their money. They, like I said, they gave me everything I needed to succeed in life. And I would do things like hide in the clothes racks at the mall, run away to get attention. I was not really an anxious kid, but I had a little bit of just maybe some angst at an early age. And I always wanted attention. When my little brother came along, he was adopted also. When he came along, I felt like the odd man out. And it wasn't because my parents treated me that way. It was because of how I felt internally. And I learned later on, that had nothing to do with what made me an alcoholic or a drug addict. The adoption, that is, the internal feelings, of course, are where this disease shows up first. But we had a great family, 2.5 kids, white picket fence. About the age of 12, I was experimenting with alcohol, and I had my first drink at 12. I was dating the perfect man, At 12 years old, when we're a little off inside, we're always looking for something to make us feel better, something to fix us. And if it wasn't being the best roller skater or being the best student or the best softball player, I was always looking for something to make me feel better. And I started dating this boy who was in the band with me, and his sister was a wiser older woman. They were pastors' kids. And she said, "Boy, you need to stay away from her. She's no good." And he listened to her. How dare he? But I somehow knew this was at 12 years old, that was such a devastating event to me when he broke up with me. And that doesn't seem to be the normal trajectory for kids, to have such a trauma-filled event over a boyfriend. And at 12 years old, I picked up my first drink. I somehow knew that bottle of Seagram's 7 in the basement would take the edge off. And somehow I also knew to fill it up with water again, though I'd never seen that before. My parents, my family, none of them alcoholic, no alcoholics, no drug addicts. A friend of mine says there's usually a few nuts in the tree somewhere, and I'm sure we had some of that. But nobody in my family drank to excess, and drugs were not even a question. So when I put this drink in me, I just knew that it would make me feel better. And I put the drink in me, and it was like, I could breathe again. I could breathe, and life didn't seem so awful. And then I promptly got on my bicycle to ride over to his house and set him straight, which didn't go so well.
I was going to ask, how did that go? I'm sure it wasn't great.
Not so well. I didn't make it there, thank God.
So, you said something, and I don't know if you can put words to it, but do you remember like the stories you were telling yourself internally that made you feel different?
Yes. A lot of them were the not good enough. I'm never good enough. I'm never going to amount to anything. My brother is the better kid. My parents love him more. And none of that was true, but inside me, it was true. I always thought that I was never going to be good enough for anybody or anything. And I did have some issues with feeling like I was abandoned. And some of that was maybe because my parents were open with me about the adoption, but I'm also very, the way that I was when I was a kid, I wanted to know the truth and I wanted to know things. But a lot of the internal dialogue was, your parents didn't want you. Why would anybody else?
Were there like, I guess one thing I was going to thinking was that at 12, did you feel the effects of alcohol? I mean,
yes.
Okay. That was one of the things.
And it kind of took the edge off, of course, all of those feelings that were welling up within me, which what I now know today as the bedevilments in the 12-step program, they were already surfacing in me at an early age. And even younger than that, I would do things like throw things at my brother or take his toys and some of that's normal kid stuff. But I remember very early on when my aunt and uncle brought him a cool little choo-choo train for his birthday. Mine was in December and his was in January. And I always felt cheated because my birthday was a week and a day before Christmas because I wasn't going to get mine, and his birthday in January, they brought him this cool little train set. And I said, "That's for me too, right?" And they said, "No, you had your birthday last month and got your gift. This is your brother's." And I threw the biggest fit ever. I must have been 6 years old. So, I knew from the beginning that I was selfish. I wanted things my way. If it wasn't my way, I was internally devastated and upset. And I learned early on to do whatever I needed to do to get my way.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I was born the day after Christmas. So
yes.
I always got here's your Christmas and birthday present. And I'm still in therapy for that. I just want people to know.
I had this idea that I was going to give them a gift in July and say, "This is for your birthday and Christmas." And that stuff doesn't matter to me now, but as a kid, it played a part.
We have that in common. My brother was born in June, and I literally had the same thoughts. I was like, when you said that, I'm like, somebody else had the same thoughts as I had. I literally thought that. So, how did how did like drinking progress like through high school and that? Did it or?
Oh, yes. I drank off and on when I could on the weekends. I was very blessed, I say now, to have a cousin who was 9 years older than me, which meant of legal drinking age. I was raised on the Mississippi River, and across the river from us, you could buy alcohol at 18. So I'm probably dating myself, but my cousin was old enough to buy alcohol. So I hung out a lot with my cousin. And he didn't want to get in trouble. So he would say no a lot, but I could usually manipulate and convince him to get me some booze. But I just probably by the time I was 14, I was drinking on the weekends as much as I could. That the first drink at 12, the alcohol really played a role in me thinking that I needed something to help me calm down, or something to help me get up, or something to help me just feel okay in my own skin. It played all those roles for me. It wasn't just one thing. I wasn't drinking alcohol at that point to quiet any horrible problems. My childhood was not trauma filled at all. My parents were great. We were raised in the church. We had youth groups and Bible studies, and my dad was in clubs, and we took family vacations. It was just this perfect existence, except for little old me having these awkward internal feelings. And so probably by the time I was 15, I was drinking every weekend as much as possible. And I was, of course, running around with people who were no good for me. Now, I was a straight A student in school, by the way, and I played sports. I did all the good things, and I enjoyed it. But by the time I was 15, I was starting to dabble with some other things, and I ended up pregnant at the age of 15. And unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond my control, was not able to have that child, which was probably the best thing for me at the time. But that started to lead me into some shame and some guilt about those decisions that were made for me. And that was something that I carried with me. I continued to drink more. I came home from a medical procedure that was decided for me, and drank a handle of vodka and took a bottle of pills at the age of 15. And there aren't many 15-year-olds that are thinking about those things, I don't think. I mean, I see more in today's world than I did back then. But, 15-year-olds in my idea, we're supposed to be going to school dances and having fun and preparing for college. And that just wasn't my story.
Well, and I think it's, and you and I think probably grew up in a very similar era. So we can date me too. Not that date Margaret is married and I'm married. That's not what I mean.
No, age.
Age wise. But the access to information wasn't there. And
Yes.
There wasn't like now, we're inundated with information. But back then there wasn't. We had home phones. We didn't have cell
Yes.
phones. We had to call our parents on payphones,
Yes.
and kids these days have no idea. But I have to give out a shout out to my cousin Vinny, because like your cousin, he was old enough. He was 19 and was of the drinking age. And
Yes.
yeah, so I certainly understand that. And so
I'm firmly convinced that had I not discovered alcohol at an early age, I am sure I would have attempted suicide.
Yep. Yeah. I often say that alcohol saved my life as well. I think, and I think it did. I really do, because it was a solution to what I was feeling.
Yes.
And I can't imagine what you went through, and my heart feels for you, because that's out of your control. And if an alcoholic like me, we are control freaks, I've
been told laughter is identification, so I laugh a lot.
Yeah, I like that. I like it. So what were some of the biggest lies you told yourself while you were drinking?
Oh, that I wasn't hurting anybody but myself, that no one was suffering but me, that I was the only one in the world with problems. And remember, this is a pretty dramatic teenage mind when I started, you know, before I started dabbling in the drugs. But the alcohol early on just had those. I had those kind of thoughts with it.
So when did drugs come into the picture?
Well, as my drinking progressed, I started, and I was working, I was going to school, I was getting pretty good grades, and I was working at a pizza place in high school, and a couple of the people were going to a concert, and we had to drive 3 or 4 hours to get there. It was a Metallica concert, and I was so stoked about this. I had saved all this money. I think minimum wage was like $3.25 an hour or $3.50 an hour, something crazy like that. And I had worked and saved and worked and saved and saved all this money to go to that concert. And before we left, they picked up some cocaine, and it was a guy that was a year older than me and a gal that was a year older than me that I worked with, and both of them had dropped out of school. So I was heading in the right direction, let me tell you. But I just started doing some lines with them, and it's very fuzzy. My brain, my recollection on some time frames and dates and places is a little mixed up, because not only did I imbibe too much, but I also had a major car accident later that I had 20 surgeries for. So between the drugs and alcohol and the anesthesia, things are a little fuzzy. But I think I had done a line or two of cocaine here and there before then at some parties, and just not thought much of it. Smoking a little pot, a lot of the kids did that at parties, but drinking was the real game until I discovered cocaine. And I was 17 when we went to that concert. And I remember being so excited about finally earning something that I wanted to do. And I get to this concert and I'm so trashed. I'm pressed up against the rail in the front row out in, I think it was Cedar Rapids, Iowa, waiting for Metallica to come on stage. And the statue blows up, and the rest of the concert, I'm in the bathroom, passed out on the toilet because I'm so trashed. I can't enjoy the fruits of my labor. And a lot of things happened like that in my life. I'd build things up and I'd rip the carpet out under it.
Yeah, that's it's like we are gosh, what's my now here goes my recall memory, Margaret. But we're gonna we're a heck of a pair. But we just destroy ourselves. We just destroy things that anything that has meaning, and and I'm sure I'm guessing that was just the beginning of that kind of behavior. Yes. So how did it progress from there?
Well, I managed to still get some good grades in school until about the last semester of my junior year in high school. And by then I'm skipping school to go to the local pool hall to shoot 9-ball, play pool, make money, drink beer. I was pretty manipulative, and I went to in school, we used to be able to give blood in school. The American Red Cross would come out and we would be able to donate blood when we were 17 or 18 years old. So I went down to give blood and lied about my age because I wanted to get out of class. And I went down to lie about my age and give blood, and I did. And they gave you this little American Red Cross card that had your birthday on it. So I did not have any identification when I went to the pool hall, of course, except I had this American Red Cross card, and I was old enough by those standards to get in. They didn't card the way they do now places, but I was able to use my good deed to feed into the bad ones. And so I'm skipping school, I'm playing pool, I'm making a little money. My hometown of Rock Island is about 3 hours from Chicago, so we thought it was fun to hop in the car and drive up to Chicago for the weekend. And we'd get in the car with a bunch of booze and nowhere to go and nothing to do and no money. And I cannot tell you how many times I did crazy things like that and don't know how I got home, or don't know how I found the money to get where I needed to get or do what I needed to do. But that was my junior year. I got kicked out of school. And, I always thought it was pretty comical that they gave somebody like me a 6-month summer vacation, and that was my consequence. I'm like, okay, cool, I'll take this. And, but I knew I was in trouble because my dad took off work to go to school with me. And he helped me gather all my things, and it was not pleasant. But after that, I just kind of did what I wanted for the next 6 months. And I had, of course, more time. I didn't have to get up for school, and I was working more. I moved out of the house because those parents didn't need to tell me what to do, and didn't they know I was grown and could handle my own life and take care of myself. And I remember at one point living in a 1-bedroom apartment with 7 other people, and we had 2 boxes of mac and cheese and no milk and no butter. Just stuff like that. And that was just crazy teenage stuff. But I continued to drink as often as I could. By then, I'm living in this sad situation. My mom would come and pound on the door to try to get me to come home, and I was horrible to her. I was just awful to the people that I loved. But the drinking and the drugging was getting worse. And I finally ended up coming home when it was time to go back to school my junior year, because I had good grades. I could come back and graduate with my class. So I did that. But it was like pulling teeth for my mother to get me to do that. And I did go home. I couldn't miss a day of school or I wouldn't graduate. And I had to take certain classes, and I passed everything. But, I got a little squirrely in the middle of the year, and I just wanted to have some freedom. So I went out in December and got super trashed and ended up pregnant again that night. The night of my 18th birthday, I got pregnant. And I gave birth after I graduated. I graduated in June that year. I was pregnant the whole second semester of school. And I took the fall semester off. My parents still had high hopes for me to go to college, and I took the first semester off to take care of my son. And instead of taking care of my son, I realized I had more freedom, and now his dad's around. And if I just move in with him, I'll have people to watch this kid so I can go do what I want to do. And it wasn't that I didn't love my son. I loved him more than anything, but I just did not have the power to say no. And at that point, I didn't want to, because partying was starting to be a lot of fun. I'm finally now 18. I'm out of the house. I've got a baby. I've got somebody to watch the baby. There were times I'd leave him at my mom's house for 3 or 4 days at a time, and she and my dad would end up watching him. And I'd come home so trashed I couldn't take care of him anyway. And when I was living with his dad, we had a lot of the same situation. I would leave and disappear for 2 or 3 days. I'd go get high. I'd get drunk. I'd do whatever to have fun in the name of partying. And he didn't like that much, and that didn't last long. So I decided it was time to buckle down and go back to school. My dad and mom had saved enough money for me to go to college. And so my thought was not, how can I make them proud or get a good degree and make a good living? It was, how little school can I take to get through, to make as much money as humanly possible without having to put much effort into it. So I got a paralegal certification, but I've been in the legal field for 30 years now, so it's paid off well. But after I finished school, I was still drinking a lot during that time. And after I finished school, I had come to the point where I was just done in this relationship. We had gotten married. I got pregnant. We had a daughter. So I have 2 kids by this point, son and a daughter. My son was 2 years old when we got married. My daughter was born about 1.5 years later. And 6 months after that, we were separated because he couldn't take what I was doing. And who could blame him? I wasn't being a great mom to my kids, and I loved those children dearly, and I wanted more than anything to provide for them. But by this time, my drinking has progressed into 4 or 5 day binges every week. I'm trying to find a job because I've graduated from college. And I just can't seem to hold it together. And I finally get a job in Rock Island in the legal field. And my husband and I have split up, and I went to this party, and we were sitting, everybody loves bonfires in the Midwest, right? So we're all sitting outside around a bonfire, and there's, I don't know, 8 or 10 of us outside. I had convinced my ex-husband to take the kids, come get the kids and take them home. And I hung around later because, the beer was still there. And I went inside, and there were 4 or 5 people sitting around a table, kitchen table. And they've got a little plate, and they've got a pipe, and they've got a ice cube on a washcloth. And I know they're up to no good. And I look around the room and kind of scanning the situation, and my brain did not tell me to run away. I saw what they were doing. I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't know they were smoking crack. And my brain said, you're going to show them how to do that. And I'd never done it before in my life. And that's when things really took a turn for the worse. I don't know how many of your listeners have smoked crack, but it's something that you're instantly addicted to. You can maybe do it once and not do it again. But my experience was that I was instantly hooked, and I was doing anything and everything I could to get more. And it didn't take long for me to run my life into the ground, to the point where I almost lost my kids. My mom was threatening to take my kids away. My ex-husband was threatening to take the kids away. But there's a new hot guy sitting at that table. So I'm on to the next victim, or husband, whatever you want to call him. And I met my second ex-husband that night at that table. And if that doesn't tell you something about where my where my lack of power is, I don't know what does.
So what was like the lowest point in your addiction?
Oh, geez. So many. I used to feel like my story wasn't good enough, like I didn't have all these tragic, traumatic things. And it kind of kept me out of coming into the rooms of a 12-step program for a while, because I didn't feel like my story was bad enough. And so I just want to, before I go into that, I just want to clarify that alcoholism and drug addiction is not an external thing. It's very much an internal condition that we suffer from. And I wish that we would talk to people in meetings about the illness and what's wrong with them versus telling our drunkalogs, so to speak. We spend so much time talking about what our lives were when we were out there doing the deal that we completely glaze over what's wrong with us. So I find it really hard for people to get well in the area that we're in, because there's a lot of meetings that are kind of pep rallies for, one day at a time, instead of this life-changing, transformative power of God that can give you a brand new life. So that being said, my internal condition is what is the gauge for whether I have a disease or I don't. If I can set this stuff down and walk away from it and leave it alone and never go back, even if I've got to go through detox or something to get it out of my system, if I can stay away from it, chances are I don't need to do anything. But if I can't stay away from it, and I've truly made this decision that I'm never going to do it again, and then I find myself without the power to back up the decision I made not to do it again, that's when I need to get some help, if I'm willing and ready. And I had numerous times where I would tell myself, I'm going to go home. I'm going to be a good mom. I'm going home after work. I'm going to wash the car and wash the clothes and make the bed and do the laundry and make dinner and feed my kids and get them off to school. And there were numerous times that I would find myself in an alley somewhere with somebody I didn't know, taking a hit off a glass pipe, doing things I shouldn't be doing to get more. I remember at one point I chased somebody out of the alley and followed them into an apartment and just banged down the door of, I was in the hood. I had no business being where I was. And I have several times put myself in positions where I could have gotten myself killed because of the way that I was behaving. And it was to get more. I couldn't go without more. So I was chasing this guy down and busted my way through an apartment door and got hit a few times. And I just can't even remember some of the details, like it's just so fuzzy. And again, don't know how I got out of that situation or how I got home. I have no idea. I don't know how I found my car. I don't know any of it. It's just a lot of blackout type stuff. But putting myself, and there was another time I drove into the projects to buy some crack, and rolled down my window to take some stuff from the guy and looked at it and knew it wasn't, I'd given him the money and he gave me the rock, and I knew it wasn't dope. I knew, well, that's what we called it. They call that it was dope to me back then. That's what we called it. I knew what he gave me wasn't good. And so I backed my car up and grabbed the money out of his hand and took off. I mean, and he was pulling a gun when it's just, things you don't think about. And in these moments, I think I'm invincible.
It's the insanity of where it takes us. And I think that's where people can relate to. And, I had an old friend who used to always say, a bottom is not a place. It is a feeling. For some of us, it is a dent in a Mercedes. And for some of us, it takes living under a bridge. But for most of us, it's somewhere in between,
Yes.
So I love that you said that. So what was the turning point for you?
Oh, geez. Oh, there were so many. I started donning the doors of 12-step fellowship. Jeez, my daughter must have been 3 or 4 years old, and she's 32 now. And I've only been sober 15 years. So 17 years in and out of, and I tried numerous things, NA, AA. They didn't have DAA then. We're pretty involved in that now. But that's Drug Addicts Anonymous. It's just a different fellowship that uses AA literature. They went to AA and got permission to use that, which was a good thing. But, I started donning the doors of recovery meetings very early on, and I would get sober, and I would stay sober for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. It cracks me up because I remember one of the times I got sober, there was another crackhead in the rooms, and I was going to AA at the time. There was another crackhead in the room, and we kind of bonded, and he was he was older than me at the time. Probably in his early 40s, and he had been sober like 13 months. And that to me was enormous. It was an enormous amount of time. And I remember coming into the rooms, meeting these people, thinking they're all crazy, wanting them to teach me how to drink and drug like a normal person, because apparently normal people do drugs. I don't know. and wanting them to teach me these things, to becoming so desperate that I didn't want to do it anymore. And at one point, I gave another crackhead my debit card so that I wouldn't use my debit card on the weekends to pull money out to go get high. And it just dawns on me, like, you gave another crackhead your card. Was that a good idea?
I wasn't going to say anything. I wish it would have hung around you at those times, because, I might have got a free debit card.
Yeah, right?
So what was the moment you realized you needed help, like really needed help?
I knew that, man, I have several instances leading up to that. I remember one time I was in the bedroom pushing a pipe. Now, mind you, I hadn't paid my mortgage payment in months. If I was paying any bills, it was because my parents were giving me money to do so, or paying the bills directly for me so that I wouldn't screw off the money. And I can look down the alley of where my house lives, and I can see an AA meeting down the street on the corner. And I'm in the bedroom, and I'm pushing a pipe, and I'm on the phone with my husband at the time, my second ex-husband, who had called me from treatment. And I am in the spot where I just am stuck. I'm stuck. I can't move. I can't leave. I can't. And I'm sure people who have done that stuff will know what I'm talking about. You're almost like paralyzed, but you know everything that's going on around you, but you can't keep yourself from pushing a pipe or trying to find more or digging off the carpet or whatever it is. And he calls me from treatment because he's decided to go to treatment. And he says, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Nothing. I gotta go." He's like, "You have a problem. You need to get some help." And I'm like, "Me? I don't have a problem. You're the one in treatment. You're the one with the problem, dude, not me." And that was kind of the beginning of me seeing that what I was doing, I knew look, I was raised with really good morals, right? If that was enough to keep me sober, it would have done so a long time ago. But I was raised with really good morals. We were raised in the church. We had lots of family friends. And I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I knew it. But at some point, you just cram so much stuff down over that little voice inside you that says, don't do that, which I think is God today. We cram so much stuff down over that voice that you don't hear it and you don't want to hear it and you can't see it. And that was one of the moments for me where it started to be, okay, yes, you need to take a look at this. And then I would don the doors of a room again for 6 months or 9 months, and the internal condition would get so disturbed that I could not keep myself from using. And so I did that for, good Lord, I probably had, I had numerous periods of sobriety, anywhere from 9 months, 6 months, 3 months, 18 months. I had 2 years at one time. And I had 5 years and 3 months. And I remember thinking, this is it. Right? And I'm going to meetings, I'm hanging out with good people, we're doing all these things. And at 5 years and 3 months sober, I picked up a drink again because I thought that I'd been separated from it long enough that it wouldn't hurt me this time. That insidious insanity of the first drink, or that mental obsession, whatever you want to call it, this idea that I can't keep myself from having when I'm separated from this power I need to live, this idea came to mind that said, well, you can have a little, it'll be okay. And I go, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Because I don't have the power to back up that decision I made not to do it. So after that, I really started to understand alcoholism. I really started to understand that it's physical and it's mental, and that I didn't have any power when that drink reared its ugly head. I did not have any power, and I needed to find some power. And so I looked for that power in a lot of places. I looked for it in the next boyfriend, or trying to go to school and get a degree, or, just hanging out with people, being a big shot, or whatever it was,
So you realize you need to find the power, and it's kind of the difference maker, really, with coming in and out. I would guess, right? You just,
yeah,
what is it? Almost like white knuckling it, being dry. They call it all kinds of stuff,
Yep.
But there's a difference between working towards finding that power. So how did you find that power?
Well, I can tell you that I had come in to meetings, come back to the fellowship many times. And many times, I can think of at least 3 times of the many that I've been there, but at least 3 times I was so desperate and so done and so miserable that I didn't know what else to do. And I remember thinking, there's nothing for me here. This doesn't work. And it never dawned on me that I hadn't actually done the work. So I remember after that last, that last 5 years and 3 months where I picked up a drink again, I remembered thinking, there's nothing here for me. This doesn't work. And so, I do what every logical person does. I moved. And I moved across the state down to the whopping metropolis of Danville, Illinois. It's right on the Illinois-Indiana border. And I'm sobered up again. I'm working a decent job for a large pharmaceutical company. No free samples, unfortunately, but I'm working for this place. I'm making decent money. We get paid once a month. And I've got 3 kids by this point. I'm a single mom with 3 kids, and my rent was $500 a month, and I couldn't pay my rent, because I'm back to doing what I was always doing. But I remember there came a point in that when we were living in Danville where my new boyfriend, because I always had one of those I could find to suffer with me, misery loves company, and I met this guy, and we were dating, and then we were living together, because dating in these programs is like 2 weeks and then you're living together, sometimes sooner. But not always. That's not always the case. But we were going to a party on Memorial Day weekend, and I had been sober for, I don't know, maybe 18 months or a little over a year or something like that time. And I'm trying to do it on my own power because nothing else is working. And we go to this party, and his boss is there, and his boss is this really hot guy, right? Tattoos all over his neck, and just runs a business. And I'm like, oh, this is, next, who's in line next? Because remember, I've got this internal condition that I'm always trying to fix with something. And my boyfriend got trashed on Xanax and Jim Beam. And so I decided, well, what the heck? There were baby beers there. I don't know if you know what those are. They're little 6-ounce glass bottles of beer. And the lie that I told myself this time was, nobody gets drunk on baby beers. You can have one of those. And so, of course, I started. And then this physical piece to this disease it makes me keep drinking, right? And I'm off to the races. So I put him in the car to drive him home after I've, had 6 or 8 little baby beers, because nobody gets drunk off those. And I've got a little 6-pack of baby beers in the car with me, and I just got paid. And I tell the boss guy, hey, if I bring some money back, can we cook up some stuff? Because now I haven't smoked rock in, I don't know, maybe a year and a half at this point, because I moved to get away from it. And, people like me are always around. So can I come back after I drop him off? And he says, of course. So I take the boyfriend home and pour him out in the bedroom. And I'm driving all over trying to find this guy's house. And it was down on the bad part of town. And I'm driving all over, going back and forth on these railroad tracks, or across these railroad tracks. And down there, there's this like foot drop off between the railroad tracks and the side of the road. And I'm driving back and forth looking for this house. And I cannot for the life of me find it. And I remember being so desperate at this point, and I'm feeling the alcohol. And I remember crying out to God in that moment. And I said, God, please, whatever you have to do, don't ever let me smoke that stuff again. And my front wheel went down in that divot between the railroad tracks and the road, and my car flipped end over end. And I landed on the roof of the car, and I'm mad because the beer's broken and there's money all over the car. I mean, I must have had like $1,500 bills floating all over the car, and because I was going back to score. And I just remember being so mad. I was pissed that the beer was broken and that I was probably going to get in trouble now. And welcome to your first DUI. The officers were kind enough to let me stop at the ATM machine to get more money out to bail myself out of jail. So that was one of the moments for me that was like, oh, I really need to do something about this, because my kids were home in bed. And then I knew that power was real. But see, for a long time, I had just been making up the excuse that I'm not an alcoholic, I'm just a crackhead. So this incident happened, and I never once smoked rock after that. I believe that God removed that from me. But I also believe that I wasn't quite desperate enough to change the way that God wanted me to. And I continued to drink for 4 more years. And so what else do? You move again, right? Because things are going bad down here now. So I move, and I'm up in Wakanda, where I live now, Illinois. We're northwest of Chicago. It's not spelled the same as the movie. No, sorry. And we're actually closer to the Wisconsin border than we are the city of Chicago. But it's a small little lake town, beautiful place to live, great community, lots of lovely people, and a big fat AA meeting right in the middle of town. I'm like, great. Probably better go here. So I started going to meetings again. I found a sponsor. The sponsor was a wonderful woman, but it's my understanding that she didn't really have the understanding from the literature that we use, the big book of AA. And she was taking me through the 12 and 12. We were doing some readings. We were drawing diagrams and doing all this stuff that didn't really have to do with alcoholism. And about a year in, well, 6 months in, I'd gotten into another car accident. I was 6 months sober at the time. We were coming back from Rock Island from my aunt's funeral. And we were T-boned by a lady who ran a red light and pinned us in the ditch. And I was in the car. I was pinned in the car for 2 hours. They had to cut me out of the car. They airlifted me. They weren't sure I was going to make it. They took me to one city and took my kids to another city. Single mom, let's divide you. So that's what happened. And they took the kids to one place and took me to, well, I needed a trauma unit. I was bleeding out. I had a ruptured spleen, broken ribs, broken ankle, ruptured tendon. My arm was kind of like hanging on by the flesh. And they were convinced that I was not going to make it. And I remember when my new boyfriend at the time called this woman that I had been working with, the sponsor that I had been working with, and told her that I had been in a horrible car accident. And her first question was she drinking? And that was not the kind of sobriety in life that I wanted. I didn't want to hang on every day by the seat of my pants, trying not to take a drink. And I'm so grateful that I found a way that I don't have to do that anymore. But I was sober about a year. So 6 months after this accident, I had been sober a year. I was sober through the accident, sober through the ICU and the step down unit and the nursing home. And they told me I'd never walk again and I'd never use my arm again. And I remember a good friend of mine coming to pick me up for meetings, wheeling me out of the nursing home in a wheelchair to take me to meetings. That's the kind of stuff I wanted. And so I'm still kind of flying by the seat of my pants at this point. And I decide that, I've been off work for a while now because the accident was so bad. And my cousin, who was my alcohol supplier, was moving to Jacksonville, Florida. And so I was going to ride with him. I mean, what else did I have to do? I wasn't able to work. And so I rode down with him and we ended up touring the Budweiser plant. And that was all she wrote. Because it's not about being in the location where I was. It was about being in the sick and spiritual state I was in. I had nothing going on inside. And all of those things were resurfacing, the not good enough, the fear of failure, the fear of good enough, the fear of, not getting anybody's approval, all of those things. And my cousin invited me to go along and I went. And so I was about a year and I was 12 months or 13 months sober again at this point. And we decided to tour the Budweiser plant, and they give you these little 2-ounce pours after the tour. And I had something to prove to this guy because every time he's seen me, I've been a plastered train wreck, locked up, blacked out, traveling. It's so funny. My friends here, they all know I'm either locked up, blacked out, or in Texas with one shoe because I'm a traveling drunk. And half the time I make it without part of my clothes. but I just, I love to travel. Who doesn't? Now I get to do it sober. But so we're in Florida and we tour this thing, and I'm going to prove to my cousin that I'm not an alcoholic and that I don't have a problem with alcohol. And I have this little 2-ounce pour at the end, and I take a few sips of it, and then I dump the rest in his glass. And then I take the next kind, because you can sample too, and take the next, dump the rest in his glass. And I go, see, that wasn't so bad. And it's like something instantly inside me is like, this sucks. You need more. Just that, ooh. And we go home and I'm angry and I'm kicking things around. And he's like, why don't you just go to bed? So the next day we got up, we went to a restaurant on the beach. I had a margarita for lunch, and it's my experience is what's the worst thing that can happen to an alcoholic is you have a drink or two and you get away with it because then you think you got this. And I thought I had it under control. And so I get back home to Illinois, and my sister-in-law's 40th birthday party is the next week. And, or 4 or 5 days later. And so I drive to her party and I remember what they told me, Why don't you call somebody if you feel like drinking? And so or reach out to somebody. So I texted a friend, I called somebody else, and I get a text back that says, I said, I'm going to have 2 beers because I'm convinced I can have 2 and stop, because my entire story, every time I pick up a drink again, it's like I can have 2 beers and smoke 1 rock, and that's all I'm going to do. And it's a lie. I've seen it be a lie my entire history. And now I'm doing it again. So I'm convinced I'm going to have 2 beers. I text somebody and I'm going to have 2 beers at this party. And the response is, "Are you okay?" I'm fine. Of course I'm fine, because my brain has me convinced that I can have 2 and stop, even though I've never in my life been able to do that before. And so I do, and I have 2 beers and stop for like 10 minutes. And then it's game on. I'm off to the races, right? I've got a pitcher in each hand. I'm doing shots of tequila. I'm picking people up off the floor. Then they're picking me up off the floor. And it was just, I was vomiting for 2 days. I was so sick. And I remember after that, I was supposed to have a family day with the kids. We were all going to go bowling. We were all going to meet together, and we went. I'm so sick. I'm in the car that they have to turn around and take me home, because I haven't drank like this in over a year. That was the old days. That's not now. And they had to take me home. I was so sick, and I'd been vomiting red stuff. I don't even know what I was drinking, all over the white carpet. It was not good. And at my mother-in-law's house. And in the car on the way home, this little voice inside me said, "You are never going to be emotionally available for your kids if you continue to do this." And that was what it was for me. That was the last thing. And after that moment, I was so desperate and willing to get help that I would do anything. And I walked into that room in Wakanda to an AA meeting, and I found a sponsor who had a big book, and I started working the steps with her, and we did it in a very quick fashion. That the founders of that deal did it really quickly in the beginning. And you hear a lot of people poo-poo that stuff. And guys, I've been in and out of AA for 17 years at this point and haven't really done much of anything. So maybe it's time I do something, and let's do it quick. Because she told me I needed to get to that power, if that power was going to save my life, and that I didn't have much time. Because all those thoughts that kept happening, every time in my brain, that thought would tell me to drink, and I would do it, or pick up, and I would do it. So that was the last desperate place for me, was thinking about my kids.
And that's, I think some people I call them God shots. It sounds like you had a lot of God shots,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes what it takes. It's one of the things I think we all have in common is that we have an unbelievable tolerance, or high tolerance, for emotional, spiritual, and mental and physical pain.
Yes.
I think we as people in addiction and alcoholism, and it's why it takes so many people so long to get there, because we can tolerate so much pain. And you never know what that turning point is going to be. And that's,
I have another little theory about that. But I think that our bottoms are all the same. And I mean that because it's when we're internally to the point where we are done and desperate and willing. My external circumstances 5 years before I got sober were so desperate. My parents were convinced I wasn't going to live. They were convinced they were going to be raising children again in their 60s, because my worst, the drugs and the booze and all of it back then were so much worse than it was when I got to the end. And so I think it's this single internal event that happens within each of us. And like you said, it doesn't matter what it is. It happens differently for everybody, but it's when we reach that place that I know that I know I'm done, and I can't see how to go on, and I can't stand living the way I was, and something's got to change. And most of us cry out to God then, "Please, God, help me. Like, I don't even know if I believe in you, but help me."
Yeah, it's so so what helped you stay committed this time?
I believe that thought about my kids was from God. And I believe that my sponsor got me through the work quickly enough that I could get enough of me out of the way so that God could come in and do his thing. Because I tried I've been to therapy, counseling, uh, adoption center stuff. Um, my parents never really tried medication with me. Wasn't a kid that presented like I needed that. I was a little hyper, but I still am. I've done all the things. I've been to meetings. I've been to detox. I've been to treatment. I've been to all of these places and done all these things, and it just none of it helped. So I think when I got to that place where I was desperate enough that I could really focus on what I needed to do and do it quickly to see that there was a power bigger than me in this world and that power wanted something to do with me and would help me. The sponsor pointing out all of these things along the way that I'd tried so many times to stop on my own power. Her convincing me that it was a good idea to start talking to this power. Just all of it. It just kind of all fell in line. And like I said, I was through the step work in probably 2.5 or 3 months.
I think that's awesome. I think, like you said it. I mean, it's we 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 tend to stretch it out. We are procrastinators. And it's not always a good thing.
Nope.
They used to take guys, early on, and gals, and man, they would have them through the third step in a night. I mean, that's how
the step work in a weekend.
Yeah.
What I remember reading some stuff about the history of AA and about Dr. Bob was writing to Bill and said stuff like, why are you adding to this? What's wrong with what we did in the beginning? And I propose that question today to a lot of people. What's wrong with what we did in the beginning? I've seen numerous people get well when they do this quickly and when they're entrenched in a group of people that believes the same thing, going for the same result.
Absolutely. So what are some of the good things that have happened to you in
Holy
sobriety?
cow. There's so much. Do you have another hour? There's so much. Wow. So I remember when I made amends with my daughter and with my dad. With my daughter, she was young. I asked her why she was killing herself in school, doing all these things. She was getting up at 4 a.m., staying up till 12, doing all these extracurricular things, taking AP classes, trying to get into the best college, trying to do all the things. And I sat down and I was able to make some amends with her. And I asked her, why are you killing yourself doing all this stuff? High school and college, they're supposed to be some of the most fun years of your life, which I didn't believe, but maybe it would be true for her. And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, because I don't want to be like you. I don't want to go man to man, job to job, house to house. I'm going to make something of myself. And that was huge because you can't argue with the truth. And since that time, she went away to college. My oldest son is living in Wisconsin. My daughter is living in about an hour south of us. And my youngest son, I didn't get to talk about him. He was a blessing. He was an adopted one that came along, when my kids were 9 and 12 already. But, and he's in the military, so he's a good guy. But since that time, there's been some falling outs with my kids. They didn't, just her statement of, I don't want to be anything like you, to today. I was speaking at a conference in Austin, Texas last summer, and I'm getting texts on my phone from her while I'm sharing my experience, strength, and hope, with her asking us about, when are we going to book this cruise together, Mom? Get back to me about this, would ya? I want to go on vacation. And we travel together. And when she bought her house, I manage a law firm today. Wow, how is that a thing? I maintained my paralegal certification throughout all of this somehow. And I manage a law firm today. I have a credit card for the firm with no limit on it. They gave a crackhead a credit card with no limit. I'm trustworthy today. I show up. I do it. I'm a woman of integrity and grace, and I try to offer people the same grace that they gave me. But my kids are in my life. I have a beautiful little grandson that's about 14 months old now, 15 months old, and he's adorable. I get to be part of life today, and those things that used to matter to me, those things like money and power and property and having all the things and looking the best and having the best and being the best, I just don't care anymore. God made a place for me where I am. Um, my the blessings are so numerous. I'm actually back in school now. I had 2 classes left to finish a degree, and my youngest kind of guilted me into going back to school. He came home from the military and he was going to use his GI Bill, and he said, "Hey Ma, don't you have like 2 classes to finish? You've been griping about it for 4 years. Let's go to the school." And he drug me up to the school, the community college, to talk to them, and he does all his stuff and at the counter, and I'm standing with him because I'm mom and he's my baby, and he's 6'2" and 180 pounds and military, and he's like, I need to protect my baby. And he flips his thumb over his shoulder when he's done talking to the lady. He says, "And she's got 2 classes to finish. See if you can find something for her to do." And then he goes off to his little veterans thing and leaves me there. And I'm like, huh. So I signed up for class that day, and I've been in school since. I've got finals in 2 weeks and 1 more class to go. My parents, the dad who I owed so much money to that didn't want to see me or talk to me, made me the executor of his estate. I have their power of attorney. My parents are older. They're 87 and 91. They're not going to be around here much. And they ask me for decisions. They ask me to help make decisions when my mom needs to go to the hospital or when they have something to do. I met and married an amazing man 5 years ago. We were together 5 years before we got married. We actually lived apart for the first 2.5 years we dated, which was very new to me, but also probably more in line with what God wanted for me. But we made it a point to get to know each other and to know each other's families, and we got married 5 years ago. And we travel. We're blessed with being able to speak at events and do step workshops and tell our stories at different things. We're involved in AA and DAA. We're involved in our church again. The blessings are people rely on us, and they call when they need help. Throughout the day, all day long, there's never a day that goes by that I don't get a call from somebody or something asking about recovery. Where can they find help? My kid needs this. My dad needs that. Are there any sober houses open? And one of the most recent things that we've done is we've been able to open a faith-based community living for recovered alcoholics and drug addicts. People who are through the work. It's expensive to live in this area. Could you use a little extra help in a community setting? We do really well in community together. People like us, when we're all on the same path and rowing the same direction, and to help people grow their spiritual condition. So we've been able to do that the last couple of years and have a nonprofit organization for that. And it's just been too much to believe. There's no way. One of our friends says all the time, how did a person like me get to be the person I am today? How did a guy like me end up in a place like this, is what he says. How did a girl like me end up in a place like this? We own our own home. It's just like, we're so blessed. And it's all because of these 12-step fellowships, AA, DAA, the grace of God, and some ability to listen and learn.
Well, it's an amazing, you have an amazing story of hope, so I can see why you travel and you and your husband do it together, right? And
we do.
Which is really cool.
It is
really
very
amazing.
Cool. We do a lot of step workshops together. He's the nervous Nelly, and I love to talk, so he just lets me run my mouth and we're good. But no, he has some wisdom that I wish I had. So we learn from each other, I think.
Well, my wife's in recovery too, and I think that, I think it's such a blessing that, it's And you said, you did it differently with him. It was different in the way you developed your relationship, and it's a big deal. I was in the same relationship for, I don't know, 40 years, different people, but it was the exact same relationship.
Yes.
Until my wife, and I think it's cool in the 12 and 12. You mentioned that, and it was pointed out to me that, it tells us that we need to basically have relationships with people, spiritual, emotional, mental, then physical. Whereas when, before it always started out physical, maybe some emotion. It was always mental. And then it was like, please God, get me out of this shit.
Right? Whatever you can do for me and however much I can drain you before I kick you to the curb. It was horrible. It was a horrible way to live. And that I'm so grateful that we are both on the same path. We're both Christians. We love the Lord. We love each other. But that's not that for us. That has been the center point of our lives. I cannot tell you how much difference it has made in my life and in a relationship to know that both of us are on the same team. That he's not out to get me. I'm not out to get him. All we want to do is be helpful to people. What an absolute 180 and a complete and total blessing.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. An amazing story, Margaret. Thank you so much for taking the time to share it.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. But now I can't let you go without doing our rapid fire questions.
Oh boy. All right.
Just take a sip of the water.
All right. I'm ready. Go.
All right. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
Oh boy. Trust God, clean house, help others.
What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
Put the plug in the jug.
What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
God.
If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
Grow up.
What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
There's so many. I usually turn on K-Love. Boy, I can't even come up with one. Sorry.
K-Love will get you where you need to be.
Yes, it will.
If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
I would wish for the nonprofit to take off so we can provide places for people to have hope.
What step do you love the most?
I can't say all of them. Man, I'm a fourth step and fifth step guru. I've done lots of step workshops on step 4 and 5. It gets us gut level honest and gets us to the place where we can see who we really are without the power of God.
What step do you love the least?
Probably step 2.
What is one of your favorite movies?
The Princess Bride.
And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Job well done, good and faithful servant. And who have you brought with you?
Nice. Thank you so much, Margaret. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And for the rest of you out there, if this episode meant something to you, please share it with one person who needs some hope today. A new episode of The Cup of Joe Show drops every Thursday at noon. You can listen anytime at thecupofjoeshow.net or on any of your favorite podcast apps, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and more. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the "the." And if you're looking for daily encouragement in your recovery journey, subscribe to our friends at thedailyponderables.com, delivering inspiration straight to your inbox every morning. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share because someone out there needs to hear this today. Have a good day, everybody.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's Experience, Strength, and Hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to The Cup of Joe Show.